ladies and gentlemen. And we now have seen in New York, almost 9 years later, that the Congress is still blocking medical treatment for the firemen, the police, the emergency crews, the people that breathe the asbestos, the aerosolized, pulverized concrete, and mercury that was several feet deep all over lower Manhattan. We saw the EPA say it's safe, no respirators needed. Now in the Gulf, 100+ days into this, they say Obama says no health problems, you don't need masks. Doctors are coming out saying people are dying, getting sick. Here is a report today from the French news agency AFP. Study, oil spill cleanup workers suffering chromosome damage, respiratory illness. What do you think Core Exit does? They used it and other similar dispersants that are extremely toxic in Exxon Valdez. The average life expectancy is 51, not 75, for Exxon Valdez workers. So they live less than 20 years. They get 20 years cut off their life. And this just dissolves DNA. And they've used 40+ million gallons. They're still using it. They're shooting it from aircraft, spraying it at night. And it just shows what the globalists think of you. It's just like all the major studies about DU, killing the troops, causing a 12-fold, excuse me, I'm sorry. Pull up that London Independent article. I think it's 14-fold. No, it's 12-fold increase in children. That's right. 4-fold increase in the studies in adults of cancers, deformities, you name it. They know in their own Army studies what it did before they decided to use it. They don't care about the cops, the troops, the citizens, and you bet they engineered 9/11. This global corporate crime syndicate, all the evidence is clear, and I've been saying it before 9/11, and since then the Gulf of Tonkin is now declassified to be staged, Operation Ajax. I had a high-level CIA top analyst retired on last week, McMichael, saying the evidence shows inside job. I've had countless other engineers and architects and historians and researchers and 6 of the 10 9/11 commissioners. And so it's the same thing. If they don't care about the tens of thousands of rescue workers dead and dying, over 3,000 dead now, if they don't care about the tens of thousands of cleanup crews and lie to them and say, you're fine, the EPA says you're fine, Obama says you're fine, then we have the footage of Building 7 being blown up, the police saying, get back, they say they're blowing it up, the newscast where they said it, and they've tried to ignore this. But there's a new TV ad, and they got some great funding from great patriots that's going to run around the country this weekend. It's going to premiere here in just a few minutes, and it's such important information. Now, Manny-Badillo, of course, lost his uncle in the World Trade Centers. Bob McIlvaine lost his son, and they've both been outspoken patriots, really shattering the lie that is the official 9/11 fable that's been used to butcher the Bill of Rights and Constitution, to sell secret arrest and torture, to sell illegal wars, to sell the naked body scanners, to sell this conversion from land of the free, home of the brave, to land of the slaves and brainwashed minions. So we now go to Manny-Badillo and Bob McIlvaine joining us, and I'm glad they contacted me to premiere this here today. Gentlemen, good to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex.
Who wants to speak first about this ad, why it's important, and then we're going to premiere it?
Go ahead, Manny. Thanks, Bob. Okay, Alex, this is breaking. We're going to compete with the big boys now. For the past year in New York, there's been the Building What campaign. And essentially, that started from last year during NYC Can's petition drive, where we collected 80,000 signatures. We've made it all the way to the state Supreme Court. And in the arguments at the state Supreme Court, of course, the city was trying to fight against us. The city law office came out and said it's not a proper subject to be placed in front of the voters. I mean, that's shocking enough. But in the courtroom, when the arguments were going back and forth between our lawyer, Dennis McMahon, and the city's lawyer, and then Judge Lerner, Dennis McMahon answered one of the judge's questions. The judge said, why do we need a new investigation? Dennis McMahon, our lawyer, said, well, you know what? We have never had a real investigation because the 9/11 Commission did not answer the majority of families' questions. And there's some outstanding questions, such as what happened to Building 7? Well, Judge Lerner replied in the courtroom, and this is, you could read this. He replied, building what? And ultimately, that shows that even a New York City judge had no idea about Building 7. And this is the pivotal point in the entire event that took my uncle's life. This film, this video we have, and there's multiple videos of Building 7 coming down, if that's shown to the world, then people are going to become skeptical. They're going to start critically thinking about the event.
Yeah, Building 7 is the key. And again, we're talking to Manny-Badillo. I get all wound up, known him for years, great guy, call him Bodillo. Manny-Badillo and Bob McIlvaine. This is so important because for those that don't know, why don't you recap Building 7? Imagine if a 47-story building would have collapsed on its own that day, everybody would know its name. But the media doesn't like to talk about it because it's way down the street, wasn't hit by a plane. BBC reported, oh, it's already fallen in its own footprint. They had later admitted Reuters had given them the script. CNN reported it. And we have multiple mainstream live feeds, CNN and others, saying, get back. They've decided to bring it down. Then we have the owner saying, we made the decision to pull the building, gave the order, watch it come down. Pull it means controlled demolition in that nomenclature. Just like a touchdown is called a TD in football. Speak about that.
We have eyewitnesses. Craig Bartmer, who heard the explosions, NYPD. We have Kevin McPadden, who heard the countdown for the building. With Building 7, We Are Change every Saturday stands on the ground where Building 7, the old Building 7, used to stand. There's already a new building there. Okay, they already have built a new Building 7, and yet there's still no proper family memorial. There's a retail store up the block that sells memorabilia, but there's still no proper memorial, yet the majority of Americans do not know about the Solomon Brothers building. That was the name of the building. Do not know that it was part of the World Trade Center complex because it was north of the complex. And it came down at nearly free fall speed, directly into its own footprint. Nobody was allowed to go near it. The investigation team wasn't even allowed to go near it. It was the first building that was cleaned up, and was cleaned up within weeks.
And it's where the CIA and FBI and everybody else was based, and the city, state, and county command center. Let's get Bob McIlvaine, who lost his son's, take on this.
Well, Alex, Manny and Ted Walters, they've been doing so much work on this, and I personally, since this all began, and any parent, I don't know if you know anyone that's lost a child, but my whole investigation, of course, is what happened that day. And I personally feel that, the United States orchestrated this whole event. But what's so important about Building 7, and I think the other two buildings have to be talked about also, because my son didn't work at the tower. He was supposed to go up the 106th floor. But anyway, I've spent years investigating, and every parent wants to know, did your child go through any pain? And I finally was able to sit down with the doctor who found his body, looked at his body, and he was brought into the morgue that day. So it took me years to finally find the doctor. But why I'm so connected to Building 7 and the other buildings is I found out my son walked into the lobby of Tower 1. Could have been before the plane hit or right at the plane, but he died instantly, and it was like a big shotgun blast to him, and to the chest and the face. And people, skeptics will say, well, it was because the fire came down the lobby and it blew out, but he had postmortem burns. So there was a huge explosion in the lobby. It wasn't caused by fire. So he died from an explosion. And we hear about the explosions going on in Tower 7, the explosions in the South Tower, the explosions in the North Tower. And, of course, the commission never spoke of that.
And we've got firemen and police and janitors and witnesses about boom, boom, bombs going off everywhere.
Correct. And I can prove beyond a reasonable, this is how my son died. So he was murdered. And it wasn't because of the plane hitting the north. He was walking into the North Tower. It wasn't because of fire. It wasn't because the building came down, because he would have called me. He died instantly. He might have died right before the plane hit or right after the plane hit, because all his injuries were to his face and chest. So he didn't know what hit him. He didn't run. If the plane would have hit, he would have run. So he definitely died from an explosion. So this is why it's so important to me, because I want closure on how my son was killed or murdered. And I've been lied to since September 11th, 2001, when they had the story orchestrated for us. And this is what I'll say. So this is why the Building 7, but the other two buildings are very important, because it's these explosions. Where did these explosions come from? Well, they didn't come from the fire. Specifically in the South Tower, how the plane hits the corner of the building. Most of the explosions outside. And that tower comes down before the North Tower. Well, that's impossible.
Well, we also have the firemen on video saying the fires were almost out in the North and South Tower,
sure,
but that there was like molten lava, like a foundry, like a volcano, and jet fuel can't do that. It can weaken steel, but it can't turn it into lava.
It's impossible. I mean, we're talking about impossibilities. And then, of course, Tower 7, it wasn't hit. So all these things, and it's just, finally we're, hopefully getting somewhere that people in New York City, and it's important people in New York City, that these things were impossible, that they could possibly happen like they did. So it's...
what do you think of Glenn Beck saying he hates the victims' families and that they're...
I don't even want to talk about Glenn Beck. I don't want to talk about anybody on TV. He's an idiot. He's there to make money. He's a clown. Well,
I mean, my point is he's going there to stand at ground zero like he's a hero, but we have all these tapes of him saying there's no one he hates more than the 9/11 victims. I don't know why he's...
I would put it to him. I'd put it to anyone. I wish you could say that in front of my face. Come to my door and say that. Then see what kind of guts he has to do.
Yeah,
that.
I just thought I'd bring up that sickening hypocrisy, and they won't give the heroes medical care. They just want to wrap themselves in the American flag and their heroism. Stay there, sir.